Today, Bike Racing Without Mercy provides an introduction to WattBike's Hub app in order to demonstrate how it can help improve our pedalling technique and maximise the power to energy expended. But first, I demonstrate that sometimes it's polite to stand in order to lay down some serious wattage. Welcome to the fast, the furious and the downright curious, and another training video on Bike Racing Without Mercy. Now today's Thursday, and I'm just warming up in London ahead of taking on my endurance training session. However, on Tuesday morning, still fresh from race 3 on the Monday, and sporting the stubble that I cultivated in honour of Thomas de Ghent, I decided to embrace standing in the sprint in order to lay down some serious power. Now, of course, I'm fully aware of this technique and I've seen the pros use it many times, especially in the mountains. And Simon Yates is an excellent proponent of it, and he used it to amazing effect to win La Vuelta in 2018. Now personally, I've always eschewed it, electing to remain seated so as to focus on pedalling technique and maximising power efficiency transfer. I reasoned that ultimately that's the most efficient and quickest way to cycle. However, in race 3, I discovered that by simply rising up out the saddle and mashing down on the pedals, I was able to deploy shock and awe to the power and remain in the premier breakaway group for longer because I was better able to cope with acute power surges. So as a result, I was really keen to hone this technique on Tuesday in order to add a new arrow to my bike racing quiver. And yes, I did indeed get dropped in the final 1.5 kilometres of race 3. However, overall I was super happy with the result because I stayed within the premier breakaway group for a hell of a lot longer than race 1, and I've been much better able to cope with very much more acute power surges. And my time was a fulsome 1 minute 55 seconds faster than race 1, the last time I'd taken on Greater London's flat race, courtesy of 3R, 29.5 kilometres overall. And when you lay down the power graphs for race 1 versus race 3, you instantly see the differences in technique. Race 3, the surges and troughs in power are much more acute than race 1. So on Tuesday, I was very keen to double down on the standing and the mashing, and selected Zwift's Wringer training program in order to help me hone my technique. So once again, Zwift uses my FTP of 290 watts to prescribe the power for the sprints and the recovery, setting an intimidating 595 watts for 30 seconds, 12 repetitions, interspersed with 145 watts of recovery for 2 minutes 40 seconds initially, and then gradually reducing down to 1 minute 50 seconds by the end of the final set. On paper, it all looked extremely challenging, and with ERG mode engaged and happily policing the resistance and gearing required to ensure the correct wattage and of course no slacking, off I pedalled into Central Park. I proceeded Tuesday's bike session with 40 minutes of strength training in the gym at 6 AM, focusing on front squats, single leg deadlifts and of course a little bit of work on the abs. Now my rationale being that the bike session with 30 seconds of max effort at 595 watts and plentiful, or indeed so I thought, plentiful recovery, in effect mimics a strength training workout where you have heavy sets of weights lifted for 5 to 10 reps, but plentiful rest in between 2 to 3 minutes in order to allow recovery and replenishment of glycogen to the muscle. Also, I firmly believe that the strength training session does fire up the muscles and the nervous system ready for action on the bike. Once again, I was training on a low-fat, low-carb protein shake and some coffee in order to keep the insulin low and the adrenaline and cortisol high so as to encourage the breakdown of fat tissue to create energy. Now, I'd reasoned that by eating carbs throughout the previous day, that the glycogen stores within my muscles would be more than sufficient to see me through both the strength training session and 12 sets of 595 watts for 30 seconds on the bike. It proved to be a very close call indeed.
As I got to the third interval at 595 watts, I realised that my nervous system was lending a helping hand and really starting to kick in order to help me cope with the very high level of stress that this kind of a training session creates. And this is not dissimilar to a strength training session where, as the weights go up, the body gradually copes with the increased workload. By riding out the saddle, I could really feel the extra involvement of the glute and the hamstring as well as the quad in order to create the downforce on the pedals. And I guess that's why you can create a lot more force much faster by rising up. This can only be described as an anaerobic training session because each of the 595 watt intervals are way above my threshold. And as a result, I'm having to tap very heavily into the glycogen stores in my muscles in order to create the energy. And as the session wears on, the glycogen stores are gradually depleted, and I find it harder towards the final sets to complete the 595 watts for 30 seconds. Naturally, I'm pulling some horrendous faces, but of equal concern is the fact that when I'm out of the saddle, my riding style can at best be described as agricultural. Now these intervals are great for creating strength on the bike, and they're also great for fat loss because they ramp up the metabolism for long after the training session's over. However, there is a price to pay because they also ramp up the nervous system, and it takes quite a long time for the body to recover from this. And on Thursday, I was due to pay the price. And here, at the end of the 12th set, I find it really hard to keep the pedals turning as we transition back down to 145 watts due to the ERG lag.
super hard. Well, I hope you enjoyed the suffering there. Anyway, back to today, Thursday, and I have a very small confession to make. I was supposed to be completing 3 sets of 15 minutes at 295 watts with 8 minutes of recovery at 145 watts in between. However, when I got into my first set of 15 minutes, I got about 12 minutes in and quickly realised that my body wasn't really up to that today. It's quite a tough training session, and one which I failed to complete in full last week. I only got to 10 minutes in the third set. And as a result, I decided to bail out of the session. Anyway, having completed 12 minutes at 295 watts and being fully warmed up, it occurred to me that I could give my nervous system a bit of a break and still get a nice little training benefit from having half an hour or so at 240 to 260 watts, i.e. well below my threshold. And it also occurred to me that now might be a good time to introduce everybody to WattBike's Hub app. Now, WattBike is famed for the accuracy of its data, in particular its power data. But the Hub app also provides a whole range of other interesting information that can really help an aspiring e-cyclist like myself hone my pedaling technique. In particular, it has WattBike's sausage. And a sausage tells you two things: how much power you're putting down through the left leg versus the right leg, and also, is your pedaling technique efficient, i.e. do you have lots of dead spots in the pedal stroke, typically at the down point. Here on your screen is the Hub's visual display unit, and you'll see it's got all the usual data: power, heart rate, cadence, time, gearing, etc. But pride of place, at the top and in the middle, we have WattBike's sausage. And to either side of that, we have data telling us how evenly we're applying the pedal pressure. Now obviously on the left and the right, we're aiming for a balance of 50-50. And I'm just about achieving that. Now the sausage tells us how efficiently we're applying the power. How good is our pedaling technique? And the objective is to minimize the dead spots in the pedal strokes, typically towards the bottom. And if I focus on making nice circles with the pedals, you'll see that the sausage transforms from being really a figure of 8 like this to a nice green circle, like this. Now a pro cyclist will be able to achieve a really big green circle very consistently for hour after hour with 50-50 left-right balance. But this is still something I'm working on. And you can see it requires a bit of concentration and effort to maintain the nice circle and the arrows in the green. And if I do this consistently, the average power efficiency transfer will rise from 61 to 70, which WattBike deems to be optimal. Now, going back to standing in the sprint, look at what happens when I increase the gearing a little and stand in the sprint to lay down some big power. Big figure of 8s. And then back to seated and focusing on the circles, and quickly my nice efficient pedaling technique will resume. There we go. And what I discovered in race 3 was that whilst it's probably optimal to spend most of your time seated, there is certainly times when it's optimal to really mash the pedals and apply some serious power. In particular, we're seeking to hang on in the breakaway. And hopefully, in the future, when looking to win a sprint. But let's not get ahead of ourselves.
So to summarise, if I maintain a nice 50-50 left-right balance and target a PES score of 70 by keeping the arrows as close as possible to the green, then I'll be rewarded with a nice green circle in WattBike sausage, which will indicate that my pedalling technique is efficient because I'm minimising the dead spots in the pedalling stroke.
Anyway, my objective now is to have a nice little recovery ride, focusing on good pedaling technique, left-right balance even, nice circles, good power efficiency transfer, and then I'll report back at the end of the session to show you a little bit more of the data that WattBike Hub has on offer. I did a bit harder than expected at the end there.
The PES score of 67 indicates that my pedalling efficiency is pretty good, but with still some room for improvement. And again, my left leg is a tiny bit weaker than the right, with a score of 66 versus 69. And that's replicated in terms of leg balance, where I'm 49% left leg, 51% right leg. So a little bit of work to improve in order to hone my pedalling technique.